Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us going. I am glad you were able to make it tonight. It's good to see you. And so, as I was saying in the chat, tonight's going to be mostly a review, but also preparation for the final project. If you do have any questions, feel free to jump in, either on the chat or you can open your mic. But otherwise, things are moving along pretty well. I'm working on the week 3 mood board projects, so you'll see my feedback on those most likely by tomorrow. So I want to get those wrapped up before the weekend. Oh, and welcome, April. It's good to see you. So yeah, I'm a little bit farther behind than I usually like to be with those projects, but you will see that feedback by tomorrow for sure. Let's see, announcements and updates. Some general comments as far as the mood boards, from what I've been seeing on the mood boards as a whole. Hopefully everyone is downloading the copies that I'm returning and checking the feedback. And remember that you can make revisions to the previous week's work if there were any issues or anything that needed to be revised. And when you turn those back in, I will look over it, and you have a chance to earn back some points that may have been deducted. So, if that's the case, be sure that you're checking out the content, the comments that I put on there. Usually on pages, the comments will look like a little colored box next to some text or next to one of the images, and if you click on it, it'll open. Or you can go to the View menu and just see all of the comments in a panel by itself. So that's where I'm putting most of my feedback. So take a look at that. And so this time, and again, I have not gotten to look at too many of these yet, but the last project was the typography. So picking your typefaces for your personal project and hypothetically could be your personal brand identity. Just remember the rules that were in the readings from last week about pairing, the guidelines with pairing sans serif with serif, try to have good contrast. And some of it just comes from experimenting to see what looks good together, what different styles. Because sometimes if typefaces are too similar in their style, it just doesn't work because it almost looks like it was an accident that they are just so similar. Whereas if you get a really decorative typeface and pair that with something that's more traditional, like an Arial or a Helvetica Neue, then it looks very purposeful and more stylish. So these are some things I'll be looking at, and also you don't want to get anything too decorative for your body text because that's going to be large amounts of text, and you want it to be clear and readable. So that was a quick review. Oh, and this was in last week's lecture as well, but the idea of selecting your colors and your typefaces is not only that it can apply for this project, but also if you choose, it could be carried forward, and this could be establishing your own visual identity as a media creator, much like you would see with a corporate brand. Like I keep returning to this Burger King because they have really good examples that this is in their advertisement, but if you went to one of the restaurants, you would see signs that look almost just like this on the wall with the same typeface and the same colors, also on the packaging and also on their websites. So it's consistent. And that's the idea of branding. It's not just the logo, it's the look and the feel that goes across the board. If you look at any of Full Sail's publications, they use the same color schemes and the same typefaces as in their signs and in their business cards and so forth. So that's what we're practicing here. And we're practicing that by applying it to yourself as a media professional, but it's the same idea that you would do for a client if you were working with a client to create a media strategy. So that is the idea of what we are doing, and this is all groundwork. This whole class, in fact, as I said in the very beginning, is kind of foundational. You'll refer back to some of these ideas later on, especially in classes like the Graphic Design for Communications course, where you actually, I think he might have you refer back to your mood board itself and some of the work you did in creating letterhead and business cards and things of that nature. Are there any questions about anything we've done so far or anything that's coming up and how any of this works? Okay. Is it a specific how-to with Photoshop? And April, yes, I'm gonna go over the project in fair detail in just a minute. Okay, I was just wanting to get Tara's question. You're saying when you crop an image and try to drag it into the next image, it's really large. And what's most likely happening there is that you're taking a piece of a very high resolution image and taking it into a lower resolution image so that the ratio of pixels is very different. So that becomes really big. And let me drop out of my Keynote and I can pull up Photoshop really quickly, hopefully. But there's some easy ways to get around that I can show you, some quick fixes. I don't know if I have any high and low resolution images handy, but I can wing it. And I'm just opening up Photoshop now, so it takes a moment to get it running. All right, I'm just going to open up a couple of images at random. These don't really have anything to do with one another, but just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so here's a photo of a pine cone. Nothing too exciting, but I'm going to select all this. Let me see, I'm going to do this an easier way. I'm going to use the magic wand tool and select the white space. This must be a very high resolution image considering how long it's taking to process. So I selected the white space and I'm going to invert that selection. So now instead it's selecting the pineapple or pine cone. I'm doing this, I think I'm going about this a little bit different than what you might have done with the ducks. I'm doing I'm just cropping that single object out. And this is just an arbitrary photograph I picked. I'm going to post that in. Hold on, let me go back. Just to kind of simulate the situation, let's go to, I'm going to make sure this is a smaller image. Okay. So say we have our low resolution image, and did that paste? Okay, yeah, so there it is. So we've got this huge pine cone. And it's far too large for this to be put on this image, but what we can do is we can go to Edit and do a free transform. You can do scale as well under transform, scale. Free transform is just everything in one. And right up here at the top, hopefully you guys can see this, there's the width and height. And I click this little chain link icon so that when I change the width, it'll change the height as well. And it's at 100%. If I drop that to say 25%, let's see, there it is. Then it resizes, so it's a little more manageable. So that's one way you can go about fixing that problem. And that'll get the job done. And if, say I've got it down to 25%, and now I can see it all, but if I wanted it to be a little bit different as far as size, with free transform, you can actually grab these handles and drag it around once it's down to a manageable size. If you hold the shift key, I believe it is, hold shift and do this. Nope, that's not working. I guess if you grab the corners, it will. Okay, if you grab the corner handle and hold shift, it will keep the proportions correct. So it doesn't get all distorted. You can also do things like rotate and so forth. And that's all free transform, which is under your edit menu. Very useful. You can also just hit Command T and it'll do the same thing. A little bit quicker and easier. So that's one trick. The other way would just be to check your resolution beforehand. So go to image size, and check the size in inches as well as the resolution of both images and make sure they compare. And if they don't, then resize it before you copy and paste it or drag it into the other image. 72 is a 72 pixels per inch is considered low resolution. That's usually what you see for the internet, something that's going to be put online, whereas 150 to 300 pixels per inch is better for print if you're going to print out documents or photographs. And that's a really high resolution. That's probably the simplest way, though, is that free transform. All good? Excellent. So, April, you had asked about the upcoming project, and that's the design draft, the synthesis activity. And it's called the synthesis activity because it synthesizes all of the previous stuff we've done, including the Photoshop, but also the aesthetics concepts like visual storytelling and color theory and color psychology and rule of thirds, or not rule of thirds, visual hierarchy and so forth. And you apply those all in one design that that is the culmination of your mood board project. So all these things are coming together now. I've been using this student's example or work as my example. Okay, I do have my screen sharing on, so it might just be taking time to reload. I'm not sure. Okay. But I'm showing an example of a previous mood board, and there's, the image collage from week 1, and she's described her concept, and it gives an idea of how she foresees visualizing her mission statement and communicating that in a visual manner. And then we did the colors, the color palette, and the typefaces. So all that's coming together in a final design. And so if we go back to the image collage, you see some of these themes, the rough wood, the person standing at the edge of either a cliff or a platform, even some of the layout ideas she's already thinking about, and selected colors and fonts. So when you come down to the final project, you can see how all that has come together. There's the rough wood, which is in her vision is a representative of authenticity and like something real. Person standing on the edge with the take the leap theme, and the colors are applied in the typefaces. And that's something I don't know if was super clear, is that the colors you picked aren't necessarily the only colors that will be in your images. Those are colors that are specific to your brand identity. So like in this case, she's used it for the typefaces. Are you able to see now, April? Excellent, great. So this is what you were asking about. So if you have a logo, or if you're just using a title, that's where you would want to apply some of these brand colors, the things that are going to be recognizable as distinctly identifying you as a professional. The photographs will be very colorful and may go beyond those few colors, and that's okay. And let's see. Okay, as far as Photoshop goes, what do you need to do in terms of Photoshop? The answer is whatever you need to do. You're not required to use any particular techniques. Like, it doesn't have to be a composite photo. It doesn't have to have a color correction done or be cropped or any of these things. But it does need to be edited in some way. At the very minimum, there's going to be text added. Most likely, it would benefit you to crop an image that you're starting with in order to focus the attention on a particular object or place. Thinking about visual hierarchy. Where do you want the attention placed? What do you want most attention called to? So more likely you will be cropping and possibly resizing an image. You can photocomposite if you want to bring in an element that applies to your particular project. But ultimately, I'm not telling you have to do these things. I just want to see some editing done to the image. I want to see some text, and try for some visual storytelling. See how you can combine the words and the images to tell your story. Starting from a blank canvas, really what I envisioned for this project is more of along the lines of kind of the ads you see on We Love Ad, where it's one major image, and then with text applied. So if you find an image, it could either be something you take yourself or it could be something you find on Morgfile or a similar site. And then just start with those one or two images and begin editing from there. So probably won't be a completely blank canvas. You'll start with something as a basis first and then do editing from there. Okay, so I pretty much have gone over these bullet points. Ideally, you want to tell this visual story using your colors in some way through text colors, logo, perhaps imagery, depending on what artistic approach you take. I want to see the typefaces applied and, very importantly, a clear visual hierarchy, because very little shows me that you have put thought into this as seeing a purposeful visual hierarchy. That means you have looked at these images, you've looked at how you've arranged your text and the size of your text and logos and what other elements you're using, and decided I want my audience to see this first, and this communicates the most information, and then move on to this next element. So yeah, really put thought into your visual hierarchy. And yeah, I definitely got ahead of my slides because these are basically the same points I was getting at with Photoshop as well. Altering color. Yeah, so we've gone over these. You've practiced these techniques in your practice activities each week. And now you can think about how they play a part. If you want to alter the color of something in your image to give it more emphasis or change the emotional impact. Like there were a few examples with the foosball table image with the little plastic soccer player guys, where you desaturate the other players and emphasize one in particular, or make one stand out because it's a very different color than the rest of the teammates, things along those lines. And that's something you can do. Compositing, and something we didn't practice but is in the lynda.com lesson, is removing elements. So editing an image so that you're taking out something that you don't want there. And it's if there's like multiple objects in a photo and one of them is just a distraction, then you can try taking that away. It's tricky. It's a tricky technique, but it can be done. It's not, I don't think it would be too far over anybody's head in the class. If you've done the photo compositing, then it's certainly on that level. Oh, these are some examples. Are there any other questions, or have I answered everything so far? Okay, so you're downloading the raw photos and you want to resize it without changing the whole picture. Do you mean resizing an individual photo if you're doing like a composite, or? Yes. Well, if you open that image by itself in Photoshop, like what I was doing a moment ago, I had both images opened separately. Then you can edit beforehand before you combine the two. You can also do the free transform like I was doing in the demonstration after if you've added a second photo into the first image, then you can hit Command T, which is free transform, and resize it that way too. As long as you have the right layer selected. So these are some examples, and I think all of these are included in the folder I have linked under the assignment, so you can take a look at these, and a few more that I don't have included here in my slides. These are some pretty successful projects from past classes, a lot of different styles, and in some cases the students had some graphics experience coming in, so they're pretty refined. And so, but you know, again, I don't expect anyone to be graphic artists at this point, but you know, apply what you know. So you're saying, see how our background is white. Okay, all right. On this slide, all this border around here, is that what you're referring to? Around the edges? Because that's actually my slide. Her image is the pink part. Yes. Yeah, you'll do the work, the design work in Photoshop and save your finished design. And then save it as a JPEG or a PNG file, and then you'll just drag and drop that into your mood board. In this case, and I can't say specifically because I didn't see her doing the work, but she may have started with this photo and like done the photo compositing technique and just removed it from its original image, and then created a layer and did a fill. If you go under, I believe it's image, and you can select fill and fill it with the foreground, like the color that you have selected, and it'll fill that entire layer with, say, pink. And she's added a little border, and the little border you can add by, there's a few tricks you can do, which I could demonstrate if you want to know how to do that. But basically, if you fill a layer and then shrink the selection down by some pixels, and then you can delete that part, and it just leaves the outline. Actually, why don't I go ahead and demonstrate that? Oops. So hopefully you can see Photoshop, and I'm just going to create a new file. I would really like to see all of the editing work done in Photoshop, you know, with the text and all. Okay, so I just created a new file, and it's completely blank, so it's just black right now. If I was to do something like she did with the pink, selecting a pink color, and that's as my foreground color. If I go under Edit, Fill, and then select Foreground Color, that whole layer will now be filled with pink. Yeah, the color that it starts off with as the background is basically depends on what you have selected. When you open a new file, the background content, you can select transparent, and that would be what you're talking about, the checkerboard. The background color that you currently have selected, which in this case would be white or other. So it's just whatever you have selected when you start, but then you can change that easily by just filling that in. let's see, I'm going to add a new layer. And that's a blank layer right now. And let me do a little bit darker pink. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to fill with the foreground color. So now it's a dark pink. And if I select all and then modify that selection, and I don't know if this is actually covered in the Lynda lessons, but it's something you can try. And this is contracting the selection, so that means shrinking the selection down by 10 pixels. Let's see, did I do this? Not sure why that's not doing what I expected it to do. Okay, we'll do it this way. And there's usually a few ways of going about any particular thing. So what I did is select modify and select border instead of contract. And so this has just selected a thin border around that original selection. I'm going to invert that selection now. So instead of the thin border, I have all the inside part. And then I can delete that. And it only leaves that edge. It looks like it might have feathered that too in this case, so that it's a little bit of a gradient. That's kind of an interesting effect as well. And those are on two different layers. So you can see over here, I can turn that off and on. And those are just the colors. I used the pink color just because that's what she had used in her project. But you can use any kind of colors you want. So this is one option you can play around with. I'm going to try this one more time just because it bothered me that that was not working the way I wanted it to. Select all. And I'm going to try shrinking that selection down. Nope, still not working. Okay. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on that. But that's one way you can go about this kind of effect. You could even just draw all these rectangles using the rectangle tool. It's a little bit more variable though, because you're kind of eyeballing it at that point to make it the right size. This one is another one that's a image composite, and there's actually tons of little image details that they've put in here that are kind of ghostly. They're transparent. There's a camera, I think, and a microphone, a book, what looks like some kind of teddy bear, and a guitar. So it's sort of this exciting event. And this particular student wanted to be an event planner. And so there's sort of this firework motif going on with some interesting filters put on there. In this case, she has actually used her color palette on the image itself with these complementary colors. So you can do that if it works for your design. Lots of interesting abstract artwork going on here, though. But ultimately, it's, you can recognize the techniques that we've covered. The photocompositing to get the crowd overlaid on the fireworks, and then color correction technique to turn the crowd teal, and desaturate, or kind of applied some filters. I'm not sure what filters on the fireworks motif, but then changing those colors in the same way. It's an interesting photo composite dealing with it looks like domestic violence, but I think it was also dealing with human trafficking, I want to say, if I recall correctly. So, but some pretty striking and powerful imagery. And here it looks like you might have used a posterizing effect on a photo to create this sort of silhouette look. And these and a few more additional examples are available on a Google Drive folder that I have linked under the assignment if you want to take a look. Are there any other questions? Any other Photoshop techniques I could show, or specific questions about the assignment? Sure, go ahead. No, it's fine. It's good. That's what we're here for, especially tonight. Okay, so the question is, how do you select an image you already cropped without using the whole selection tool again? Okay, so let me drop out of Keynote and back to Photoshop. Let's go. Okay, so we'll use this since we already did a little compositing. I've got my pineapple that I can, or I keep calling it a pineapple, pine cone, that I can move around. And if I just wanted to select the pine cone by itself, as long as it's on its own layer, that'll make your life easier. Instead of using the quick selection tool, which is what we've been using, you could do that, but that leaves a little bit up to chance. A quicker way to be I do like pineapple. A quicker way might be to use the magic wand tool, which is in the same spot on the menu. If you click and hold the quick selection tool, that'll pop up. Take the magic wand. What the magic wand does that's a little different from the quick selection is when you click, it'll select the entire area that's similar in color. Or if it's empty space, it'll select the entire empty space. So if I click outside of my pine cone, it selects everything but the pine cone, everything on that layer except the pine cone. But since I want the pine cone selected, not everything else, I would have to go to select and inverse. So that means it reverses what's selected. So now I have my pine cone selected. Excuse me, I just had to mute so I could sneeze. Um, and then from there I could put on a um, a transformation layer and change the color, or change the brightness and contrast, or what have you. If for whatever reason you wanted a blue pine cone, there you go. You can do that to select. There's really no wrong way to select your object for resizing. In fact, I mean, if you, and I'm just going to remove this layer I put on here, the adjustment layer. Okay, so if I used even the rectangular selection tool, and I just drew a rectangle around this, if I then went to move it, see how the selection automatically jumped to just the outline of the pine cone. So any of the selection tools will work. You could even do the lasso tools or any of those. Okay, so it keeps resizing both images. And you have them both on separate layers? Hmm. Okay, and just okay. How are you changing the image width? Are you going into image and doing image size? Because that will change the entire project, the entire thing. Okay, yeah, so if I went in here and said, and made this smaller, yeah, see, it shrinks the whole thing. If you were going to just reduce the size of, say, my pine cone, then, like I was showing earlier, the free transform, so under edit, free transform, and then you can resize that way, or numerically using the height and width. You can also do transform and select scale, and that's strictly the size. So again, the height and width are up here, 100%. I went down to 40%, and that's the width, so I only changed the width, but it would shrink that way too. So, so that's the way, probably the easiest and best way to go about changing the size of a single object. And that only works if it's on a layer by itself. Otherwise, you're changing the entire layer. Does that work? Have you given that a try? Great. Yeah, give that a shot while we're here and let me know if that works. April, are you doing okay? And right now I'm just sort of playing around with this. I'm going to try to make it look like this little moth is carrying the pine cone. Okay, sometimes it's hard to know where to put your verbiage. Is there a rule of thumb for that? There isn't a simple rule, but it applies to the idea of visual hierarchy, and there's also principles of composition, which is something you'll get into in your graphic design course. But that's the idea of arranging elements in a way that is visually pleasing. But just some ideas. Say I was going to add some text here. I have a ton of fonts installed that I've collected over the years. So you would think, first of all, what do I want to emphasize? Do I want the text to be my point of emphasis, or do I want my image to be the point of emphasis? And I can crop this so that my moth is really my focal point. And just add some text up here. That's great. Great, Tara. And then think about how your text appears in relation to this object. So this is what I really want to be noticed, is the moth eating a pine cone. I don't really know why, but then you can use your text to accent that or to complement it in some way. So like to frame it, for example, moth eating a pine cone. And it's very large, so this is pretty arbitrary. I'm just kind of using something silly. I'm going to break this in two. And when I was talking about framing, you can arrange your text in a way that frames your key object, like I have here. I would probably want to break this up a little better because that's very clunky. A moth eating a pine cone. It's a little hard to read. And there. So, I mean, hopefully your text will make more sense than mine. But you see how that's sort of created a frame around the focal point. Just doing a little more cropping to better focus this. A few other just guidelines. There aren't really necessarily rules for placing text. Don't put it right up against the edge of your image. Try to give a little bit of room. It just makes it feel more stable and just better composed. Avoid obscuring your important elements unless there's some creative reason for doing that. So, like you can frame it to create a frame around it without hiding it behind the text. Pay attention to what the text is overlapping. Like right down here, this gets a little too. There's not a good amount of contrast in this white text and that yellow background. So I would want to either reposition that so that it has a better backdrop, or change the colors so that it shows better. So look for that negative space, and that's if you've had an art class, negative space is the space around the object. So all of this, where there's really nothing there, it's all around. That's the negative space, and use that as the place for your text. Look for good opportunities. Whoops, did not mean to move my moth. I have a go-to training control panel that's blocking half of my screen, so I can't always see which layer I'm on. And also think about balance. It's not something I covered this month, but the idea of balance is visual weight. You think about your visual hierarchy is based on visual weight, like which thing is more visually impressive. And you can decide if you want to have a balanced composition where this is pretty balanced. If you divided this down the middle, the visual weight would be even on each side. Whereas if I was to take the word pinecone and put it over here, now we've shifted a good bit of the visual weight over to the left. So it's a little bit unbalanced. Whereas having it over here added to the balance. So it's kind of, it's good to take a step back, go literally a few feet away from your screen, take a look and just see how it feels. If it feels stable and really well structured, then that's, you're on the right track. But sometimes you want it to feel unbalanced, if that reinforces some of the themes that you're going for. If you want it to be give that kind of gut feeling that things are wobbly, not quite stable. So it's a very long explanation for what was probably not a super complex question, but short answer is no, there's not really a rule of thumb, but really think about how your text interacts with everything else that's on the screen. And once you get into the graphic design, you'll learn about things like alignments and more about balance and use of the rule of thirds and so forth. Okay, and I saw that Tara, you got that working, and that's excellent. All right, so that's what I had as far as my slides, but is there anything else that I could help with before we wrap up? Okay. Great. Excellent. Good to hear. But you still have a few more days, so if anything comes up, you can get in touch, and I'm happy to try to help. And be looking for the feedback on the typefaces as well, since that might play a part in your design. Okay, one more question. Go for it. That is a very good question. You will use, oh, you can add it to your blog. If you have a blog, some of them allow you to upload. I think, I want to say Tumblr allows you to upload directly, but another easy way to do it is to go to Imgur, and I'll type that in, .com. And upload it there. You can create an account. I don't think you have to have an account to upload an image, but it'll host your image, and you can grab the URL from there. There's other sites that are similar. PhotoBucket would probably work. You could probably even, well, no, I almost said Instagram, but that crops everything down to those little squares. So no, you don't want to do that. But anything like Imgur or PhotoBucket would be great. Yeah, any kind of photo host. Perhaps even Pinterest would possibly work. Yeah, so that's just because the copy that's in your mood board will probably be shrunk down to fit the page, and this way I can see the actual original in its full glory. So there you go. The idea here is that, remember that the mood board is a planning and design tool. It's a way to get your ideas together before you start designing anything. So we've done all that, and now we've gotten to the point where you've made all these decisions, and this is a design draft is what I called it, but it's kind of like a mock-up. If you were working with artists and designers and you were trying to say, this is what I have in mind, now you're creating this mock-up, and you can say, this is kind of my idea. So, not that you are not capable of creating your own designs, because hopefully you are or you will be, but since we're early on in the program, this is where we're at. All good? Wonderful. Okay, well, if we are all set, then I want to thank you for joining me tonight and wish you a good evening. And let me know if anything should come up. Okay, I'll keep an eye out for your email. Have a great night.